The first time Antonio's fingers grazed mine while handing me a paintbrush, I felt the jolt of a lightning storm in my veins. By the third week of summer art camp, we were standing in the golden haze of a July sunset, his breath hot on my neck as he murmured, "Your hands are steadier than mine, Miss Delaney. Teach me how to stop trembling." But I am getting ahead of myself. Before we dive deeper, I need to pause and thank you. Yes, you leaning into your screen right now. To my subscribers, you're the reason I can share this story without crumbling. To new viewers, hit that button. It's more than a click, it's oxygen for this journey. And to everyone, drop a comment. Tell me if you've ever stood on the cliff's edge of a choice you knew would ruin you. Now, let's begin. My name is Pauline Delaney. At 63, I had settled into the rhythm of a life half-lived, teaching watercolor workshops at the Cedar Ridge Summer Art Camp, married to Richard, a retired accountant who talked more to his begonias than to me. Our conversations had long been reduced to weather forecasts and grocery lists. I told myself it was enough until Antonio Ruiz walked into my classroom. He was 29, all lean muscle and restless energy, with a smirk that hinted he had already seen the punchline to the world's joke. "Call me Tony," he had said, slinging his canvas bag onto a desk. His eyes, dark, direct, locked onto mine. "I am here to learn how to paint something that matters." The camp was nestled in Vermont's pine-drenched hills, a place where middle-aged women in linen tunics and teens clutching scholarships collided over acrylics. Antonio didn't fit. He wore paint-splattered jeans and a leather cuff on his wrist, quoting Neruda between critiques. "Your sunset lacks hunger," he told a flustered student. "Make it devour the horizon." I should have kept my distance. But during a late-night session, he lingered after others left. "You ever feel like you're painting the same thing over and over, Miss D?" he asked, swirling burgundy into a mug of wine. I had brought the bottle, a weak attempt to bond with students. Life's not always a bold stroke, Antonio. Sometimes it's layers. Layers. He laughed, low and rough. Or hiding. The air thickened. I busied myself cleaning brushes. "Why did you stop exhibiting?" he pressed. I froze. My last gallery show was a decade ago, a fact he had dug up. Life happened. Bullshit. He stepped closer. "Your piece, Woman in Gray. It wasn't just grief. It was rage. Why did you bury that?" No one had seen that in my work. Not even Richard. "You don't know me," I said, voice cracking. "I want to." His hand hovered near my waist. "Tell me how to paint the storm inside you." I fled. But the next day, he brought me a charcoal sketch, my profile, etched with shadows that made me look alive. "You're the most interesting thing here," he said. I should have discarded it. Instead, I tucked it beneath my pillow. That Friday, during a plein air trip to Lake Champlain, Antonio waded into the water. Jeans rolled to his knees and shouted, "Come in." The light's perfect. Students giggled as he splashed. My chest ached. Richard hadn't splashed anyone in 20 years. Ms. D. Live a little. Antonio's grin was a dare. I dipped my toes in. He lunged playfully, drenching my sundress. I gasped, then laughed, really laughed for the first time in years. Later, as we dried on the shore, he whispered, "You're terrifying when you're happy." Terrifying? Makes me want things I shouldn't. The confession hung between us, raw as an open wound. That night, I lay awake, replaying his words. At 2 a.m., I crept to the studio, seeking solace in a blank canvas. But Antonio was already there, shirtless, painting feverishly. "Can't sleep either?" he asked, not turning around. The piece was abstract, a whirlpool of crimson and gold. "It's not ferocious," I said. "It's you." He faced me, chest glistening. The woman who's everywhere and nowhere in her own life. I stepped back. He stepped forward. Tell me to stop, he breathed. I didn't. When his lips brushed mine, the world narrowed to the smell of turpentine and his choked whisper. Pauline. Then, a crash outside. We jerked apart. A raccoon, scavenging trash cans. This is. I trembled. Inevitable, he finished. But I ran again. By dawn, I had decided to resign. Then Antonio cornered me in the supply closet, eyes blazing. Don't you dare walk away from this. From what? From us. The word tore through me. There was no us. There couldn't be. But as his thumb traced my wrist, I knew I was already falling. The supply closet smelled of linseed oil and regret. Antonio's grip on my wrist was firm, his voice frayed at the edges. You feel it too, he said, not a question. The dim light caught the silver chain around his neck, a tiny paintbrush charm dangling from it. His mother's he had mentioned once. A detail I shouldn't have remembered. This isn't a feeling, I hissed, yanking my arm back. It's a mistake waiting to happen. Then let it happen. His eyes dared me to look away. I didn't. I avoided him for 3 days. Buried myself in grading, chaperoned field trips to maple syrup farms, and called Richard every night. Our conversations were stale crackers. The begonias are blooming, he said. Good, I replied. Neither of us asked why that mattered. Antonio didn't relent. He left sketches in my mailbox. Quick, hungry lines that captured the slope of my neck, the way I tucked my hair behind my ear. I tore them up, then taped them back together. On the 4th night, I found him in the studio again, this time shirtless under a denim apron, splattering black ink across a canvas like he was exorcising a ghost. The piece was violently beautiful. You're avoiding me, he said without turning. You're observant. He laughed, bitter. You think I am some kid with a crush? I am not here to play games, Pauline. Why are you here? The question hung like wet canvas. He finally faced me, ink smeared across his collarbone. To remember what it's like to want something real. My throat tightened. You don't know me. I know you married a man who treats you like a houseplant. Watered once a week, left in the sun. The truth of it stung. Richard had forgotten our anniversary last year. Antonio had memorized the way I took my coffee after one morning. You're reckless, I whispered. And you're alive, he shot back. Stop pretending you're not. The next morning, during a life drawing session, Antonio volunteered to pose. Students tittered as he stripped to his boxers, lounging on the draped platform like a Renaissance martyr. My charcoal trembled. Focus on the tension, I instructed, voice shaky. The lines of conflict. Antonio's gaze burned into me. Conflict's just desire wearing a mask, right, Ms. D? A student snorted. Heat crawled up my neck. Later, he cornered me by the kiln, its dry heat mirroring the air between us. You drew me like you were starving, he said. It was an exercise. Lies, he said, and stepped closer. Your hands shook the whole time. I gripped a shelf. Clay dust coating my tongue. What do you want from me? Everything. His thumb brushed my lip. Starting with the truth. The kiln hummed. I nearly kissed him. Nearly let the fire consume us, until voices echoed in the hall. We jerked apart, but not before he slipped a folded sketch into my pocket. You're my masterpiece, it read. Beneath the words, a rendering of us tangled in brushstrokes. Guilt festered. I called Richard that night, desperate for a lifeline. Maybe I'll come home early, I offered. Don't be silly, he said. You love that camp. I choked on silence. The following week, Antonio convinced me to critique his portfolio at dusk. We sat cross-legged on the studio floor, knees grazing. His work was all chaos and longing. A self-portrait with hollow eyes, a nude figure dissolving into smoke. This one's called Guilt, he said, pointing to a stormy seascape.
Why?
Because the tide always drags you back to where you shouldn't go. His hand settled on my ankle. I didn't pull away. We began working late. The camp director, Marjorie, a sharp-eyed widow with a penchant for vodka tonics, started eyeing us. Students talk, she warned one afternoon, polishing her glasses. Be careful what they see. I laughed it off. But that night, I found Antonio's sketchbook open on my desk. Inside, page after page of me, laughing, scowling, bending over canvases. The last drawing stole my breath. Us, naked, limbs entwined like vines. You're out of line, I hissed when he arrived. Am I? He trapped me against the desk. You keep it because you want it. I am married. To a ghost. His lips hovered over mine. Let me make you real. The door creaked. We froze. Marjorie stood in the threshold, her gaze darting from the sketchbook to Antonio's hand on my hip. Pauline, she said coolly. My office now. Marjorie's office reeked of lemon disinfectant and unspoken threats. She leaned back in her leather chair, tapping a pen against a folder labeled Delaney, Pauline.
You've got two choices, she said.
Resign quietly by week's end, or I send these photos to the board and your husband. She slid a grainy shot across the desk, Antonio's hand on my hip, my head tilted toward his lips like a flower chasing light. This is manipulation, I stammered. No, she corrected. It's survival. Scandals kill enrollment. Her smile was thin. Choose wisely. I found Antonio smoking behind the studio, his face lit by the cherry glow of his cigarette.
Well?
He asked. She wants me gone. So quit. He blew a smoke ring. We will paint our own damn sunset somewhere else. It's not that simple. Because of him?
He scoffed.
The begonia whisper? Because of me. My voice cracked. I am not some teenager chasing a fling. He crushed the cigarette under his boot. You think this is a fling? His kiss was bruising, all teeth and desperation. When he pulled back, his thumb wiped my smudged lipstick. You're the only real thing in my life. Liar. Poet. Prophet. I believed him anyway. We met that night in the boathouse, its rotting planks groaning under our weight. Moonlight sliced through cracks, painting his skin silver. Tell me you want this, he demanded, pinning my wrists above my head. I want this. Louder. I want. His mouth swallowed the rest. Afterward, I traced the scar on his shoulder, a jagged line he had never explained. Where did you get this? A reminder. He rolled away, pulling on his jeans. To never trust pretty lies. The affair became a fever. We stole moments in supply closets, forest clearings, even the camp's dusty attic. Antonio's sketches grew darker. A noose of roses, a woman drowning in a gilded frame. This is us, he said, pressing me against a wall streaked with old paint. Trapped in someone else's masterpiece. Richard called twice. I let both go to voicemail. Marjorie cornered me again after lunch. Pack your things, she hissed, or it'll ruin you. Do it, I dared. Her laugh was icy. You will wish I had. Antonio's moods shifted like storm clouds. One night, gentle as he braided my hair. The next, biting my shoulder until I bled. Why do you stay with him? He would snarl. Is the money that good? It's not about money. Then what? I never answered. He started asking about my past. Did you ever cheat before?
No.
Liar. He flipped through my old portfolio, pausing on a 20-year-old piece. Lovers in Blue. You painted this after your first affair, didn't you? I shot through my veins.
How do you know about that?
He shrugged. Artists repeat their patterns. The camp's closing gala arrived. White tents, twinkle lights, parents sipping Chardonnay. Antonio dragged me into the darkroom, chemicals stinging our eyes. I am leaving tomorrow, he said, unbuttoning my dress.
What?
Come with me. I can't just… Yes, you can. His teeth grazed my collarbone. We will go to Mexico. Open a studio. Live like we mean it. This is living.
No.
He gripped my chin. This is hiding. Shouts erupted outside. Flashlight beams sliced under the door. They're looking for you, he murmured, hands still roaming. Antonio, stop.
Why?
His smile didn't reach his eyes. Scared they'll see who you really are? I stumbled into the party, dress inside out. Richard stood by the punch bowl, holding a begonia. Surprise, he said flatly. Marjorie called. The room tilted. Antonio appeared, smirking, a glass of wine in hand. Mr. Delaney. Heard you're a gardener. Must be fulfilling work. Richard studied him. Do I know you? Not yet. Antonio's gaze locked on mine. But you will. Richard's grip on the begonia tightened, petals crumbling to the floor like confetti. Marjorie said you've been distracted, he said, voice eerily calm. Antonio sipped his wine, eyes glinting. Let's talk somewhere private, I begged, tugging Richard's sleeve.
Why?
He shook me off. Seems like the whole camp already knows. Antonio stepped closer. Knows what, exactly? Enough. Marjorie materialized, clutching her phone. Follow me, or I pressed send. The crowd murmured as she led us to her office. Antonio trailed behind, humming. Marjorie tossed a USB drive on her desk. Copies of everything. Security footage. Emails. Even your little boathouse rendezvous. She glared at me. Resign tonight or I release it all. Richard paled. Boathouse? Antonio laughed. Oh, it's worse than that. Silence, Marjorie snapped. He leaned against the wall, casual as a panther. Or what? You'll fire me? I quit. From his pocket, he pulled a faded photograph and slid it toward Richard. Recognize him? The image. A younger me, laughing in the arms of a dark-haired artist. Gabriel Ruiz. Richard squinted.
Who?
My father, Antonio said. Ice flooded my veins. Gabriel, brilliant, tempestuous Gabriel, who had drowned himself in tequila after I ended our affair 30 years ago. You're a muse with teeth. He had slurred the last night I saw him. You'll ruin someone real one day. Antonio's smile was venom. She didn't tell you about him, did she? Richard stood slowly. I am leaving. Wait. I grabbed his arm. He shook free. Water the begonias yourself. The door slammed. Antonio clapped mockingly.
Bravo.
Now, you know how it feels. Marjorie gaped. What the hell is happening? Family reunion, Antonio said. To me. He killed himself 6 months after you left. Left a note. Pauline's gray is all that's left. I recoiled. You think this revenge fixes anything? Revenge? He stepped closer. I wanted you to see what you do. What you are. And what's that? A coward. His voice broke. Just like him. We faced off in the empty parking lot, cicadas screaming. You used me, I said. You let me. Moonlight carved shadows into his face. But hair-race the twist. I didn't plan to fall for you. Liar. He kissed me, brutal and sweet. Tell me it's all a game. Go ahead. I couldn't. Headlights flooded us. Marjorie's SUV screeched to a halt. Check the camp's social media, she hissed, shoving her phone at me. A post. Faculty affair exposed. With a video thumbnail of Antonio pinning me against the darkroom wall. Views, 10K and climbing. The phone trembled in my hand, the screen blazing with comments. Disgusting. Predator. Burn her studio down. Antonio stared at the viral post, his smirk dissolving. I didn't upload that, he said. Marjorie lunged at him. You ruined my camp. Your camp? He laughed coldly. You're just a drunk with a clipboard. I stepped between them, my voice steady for the first time in months. Enough. At dawn, I drove to Richard's. He answered in a tattered robe, eyes bloodshot. I have filed for divorce, he said. I know. I handed him a manila envelope. Open it. Inside, adoption papers from 1985. A baby boy, born to unknown father, signed over to a couple in Vermont. Richard frowned. What is this? Gabriel's son. My son. The words tasted like ashes. I was 24. Scared.
Broke.
I couldn't.
You.
Had a child? With Gabriel. Before I met you. I pointed to the adoptive parents' names. Ruiz. His face slackened. Antonio is your son? The art camp was swarming with reporters when I returned. Antonio stood on the studio steps, yelling at a cameraman. Get that thing out of my face. Antonio, I called. He turned, rage melting into confusion as I held up the papers. Read them, I said. His hands shook. When he reached the birth date, June 15th, 1985, he crumpled to his knees.
No.
Your adoptive parents never told you, I whispered. Gabriel didn't know either. I left before I showed. He vomited into the grass. Marjorie's downfall came swiftly. The camp board discovered she had embezzled funds, framing the scandal as a distraction. She resigned, but the damage was done. My career was rubble, but rubble can be rebuilt. Antonio vanished. Left a note. I wanted to hate you. Now I just hate myself. Richard sent divorce papers with a PS. The begonias died. I sold the house, rented a loft in Brooklyn, and painted. Not sunsets or storms' faces. Antonio's. Richard's. Gabriel's.
Mine.
Last week, a gallery owner called. Your new work. It's raw. Unforgiving. Let's exhibit it. The show's title. In the Gray. On opening night, a figure lingered in the back. Antonio, gaunt but sober. He stared at the centerpiece. A mother and son, their faces fractured but reaching for each other. He left before I could speak. But on the guest book, he had scrawled, I am sorry.
So am I.
To my viewers and listeners, this story was a mirror held up to my darkest corners, and sharing it with you has been both terrifying and freeing. If it gripped you, please let me know. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in Pauline's place? Could forgiveness ever be possible? Your thoughts fuel this channel. New here? Hit subscribe. You won't want to miss the next twisted tale. Like and share if you felt even a flicker of Pauline's storm. And to my loyal subscribers, you're my lifeline. Thank you for turning my ashes into art. Until next time, keep searching the gray.